The Israel-Gaza ceasefire is supposed to have started by now, but there's been a delay, and it's slated for 8:30 a.m. And it's Hamas has failed to provide the list of hostages to be released, citing technical reasons. That list was supposed to be provided 24 hours before the ceasefire begins. And concurrently, there's been a stabbing in Tel Aviv, which has added further tension to an already fraught situation. The background to this, the 6-week truce agreed upon by the mediators from Qatar and Egypt and the US, which would involve the release of 33 hostages, primarily women, children, and the elderly, in exchange for 90 Palestinian prisoners, and the gradual withdrawal of Israeli troops and the access to humanitarian aid, was all part of this negotiated deal. The agreement terms required the list of hostages in advance, and the Israeli military, the IDF, confirms that no ceasefire can begin until that list is received. Hamas attributes the delay to logistical challenges in Gaza, restricted movement because of the ongoing Israeli operations, difficulty in securing safe passage for the hostages to Red Cross intermediaries. And Prime Minister Netanyahu emphasized that Israel wouldn't begin the ceasefire until the commitments by Hamas are fulfilled. Ongoing military operations in Gaza underline Israel's preparations to continue the offensive if necessary, and public frustration has manifested in protests across Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, both for and against the ceasefire. On the eve of the ceasefire, a Palestinian from the West Bank stabbed an Israeli man, heightening fears of further violence, and the incident illustrates the fragile and volatile nature of the situation, even with a temporary ceasefire on the horizon. Gaza faces dire humanitarian conditions. Its infrastructure has been destroyed. There's a lack of essential services and means, and civilians have been vigorously displaced. Netanyahu's statement reaffirms that the war's ultimate aim is the release of hostages and the weakening or the eradication of Hamas, neither of which so far have been achieved. International actors like the US urge both sides to adhere to the ceasefire, but skepticism abounds, and Netanyahu faces further criticism from coalition hardliners and the public over concessions to Hamas and the Hamas slowdown, which determines the hostage release schedule. Whatever the reason for this is now an excuse to delay and not to implement the ceasefire. This delay, this hitch, underscores the complexities of negotiating in the middle of ongoing violence. And key questions, of course, persist. Can the ceasefire hold long enough to establish trust for any further phases? Will Hamas fulfill its obligations with the internal and the external pressures that are placed on the Gaza Strip? And the Tel Aviv attack is a reminder of the deep-seated mistrust and the fragile path to a sustainable calm. It's not simply a matter of the ceasefire. There's a much bigger cultural and practical implementation of peace throughout the region. And while both sides claim a readiness for peace, the obstacles to that peace highlight just how far they remain from achieving a long-standing resolution to the conflict.